in the second section on page Tzadik Hey, which begins with the words AYIN Hu. All right, as we pointed out several times, particularly the very latest shiurim, that Chassidus in general, and particularly the Chassidus that we're learning, this AYIN base exposure of Chassidus at the deepest level, that cannot possibly be understood on the superficial level. It doesn't exist on the superficial level. It can only be understood if one steps inside, like we said, you step inside the room. By observation through a big window, it's not going to happen. Only if you step inside and you actually sense intellectually the reality of this room. We pointed out many, many times. What is the meaning of a room? How is that a mashal for anything? Because to explain, there's a big difference between a house and a home. A house is a physical structure that does not stand for anything. Has no message. A home is a living entity, an extension of a human being. Completely different phenomenon. When you learn, so to speak, the Chofes Chitzenius, is the way, the way science looks at the world, and all kinds of different idiotic perceptions. There is nothing real about it. But we do not, Chassidus does not present the world from that level. The first principle of the world of what we're learning, the first principle of the existence is it's a godly creation. If it's a godly creation, it means that it has a godly spirit in it. And it presents the principle that God has for some reason chosen to create this world. And we also explained yesterday this. I think I noticed that some of us didn't get the real point of it. I gave the example of a very simple thing, of a chicken egg. Sounds like a joke. But if we think into it, we recognize a chicken egg is a creation that a human being cannot even begin to understand how that happens. Its shells are totally sealed. There's not an entry point, a seam through which it was filled. There's no seam. It's a seamless shell, and yet internal to the shell there's a whole creation, whole world. If we think into this, what does that tell us? It tells us that there is a reality, a truth, that permeates all existence, that's present everywhere in its fullest truth. And it creates everything in the place where it creates it, because it wants created, not not through any kind of a process. And that we've also explained, and what we're learning now, how chochmah, what chochmah connects to, recognizes, and relates to, is precisely that level of truth. Chochmah relates to the reality of things. And thus, we are now faced with the so to speak, with the dilemma. How do you explain binah being a derivative of chochmah? Binah is seichel, which does have a seam, does have a process, a beginning and a middle and an end. How does binah permeate, break through the shell of chochmah, and get its message out of it? So we started explaining in the previous section that perhaps the way to understand it is as follows. Chochmah descends to the level of binah, which means chochmah initially is high and completely higher, because as I said, it has this fundamental reality, the godly reality, but through a process of descent, a process of reduction of oil, it can come down to the point where it becomes a sichli. A sichli means exactly that it does have a seam, a means of which we can enter inside. How does that happen? Because it reduces the oil. And we explained what is reducing the oil mean. What's the concept behind it? Reducing oil means the impact of the presence of the fundamental reality, of the truth itself, like a human being in his home. This makes the home. And we said many times, and I'm repeated so that we get right into this. A human being in his home occupies every last inch of the home. If there is an attic that he has never seen, he is full of there. And if you move into this attic, he's going to protest and get you out of there. This is the principle of ownership, that the Rebbe has given the human being the right to own. To own, the way the Rebbe describes it, is not just to own, it's monetary value. To own means this is yours. It is yours to develop, it is yours to do anything you want. This is the perception the way it is in chochmah. Chochmah relates to that, as Rebbe says, chochmah relates to the etzem. Etzem is a godly reality. There is no etzem on the worldly level. We mentioned this many times. And yet, from this etzem, on the godly reality, somehow, by various gyrations in the various tzimtzumim, it comes down to be a means, a source for seichel, where seichel is definitely, so to speak, a worldly process. And this is the dilemma we're trying to understand. How does this happen? And the Rebbe presented two possibilities, or whatever it is. The point is, the principle of the possibility is the reduction of oil. Oil means the impact of the etzem, and reduction of oil. So we get the emotional, and reduction of oil is you in somebody's home, and the person is present, which is the full impact of his presence of the home. But if he turns away from you and he's busy in his own thing, you have a reduction of oil. So we pointed out, despite the fact that he doesn't look at you, and you haven't seen his face, when you're in his home and you see only his back, you do not have to figure out, is this somebody's home? There's no seichel presence in deciding where you are. When you are face to face with him and you communicate, surely there's much more impact. But even if you reduce the impact to the minimum, still it is a chochmah type of knowledge. It's not a binah type of knowledge, not a seichel type of knowledge. It's an internal, it's a godly type of knowledge. And therefore, from this to come down to seichel is a, so to speak, a qualitative difference, different category, and therefore we don't see how that's possible. And this is what the Rebbe says. It's impossible, and I pointed out, just to be focusing in the way the Rebbe is explaining it to us. It's impossible to say. And he doesn't go on to explain why it's impossible to say. It's important for us to focus in and say, why are you saying that? What does it mean? That you have said half a thing. The answer is no, this is the whole thing. Because I want to awaken in you the seichel quality that you possess. And recognize this truth which I'm telling you from that vantage point, from that source, rather than from a worldly approach of a developed logic. And that is the principle of learning of Chassidus, principle of chochmah, and AYIN base is totally demanding of that type of dedication, that type of connection, of openness. You can only understand AYIN base just like in emotional. You're inside the room, where you sense the reality of this room without having to explain it, without having to experience it by communication or anything that. This is how the Rebbe is teaching us AYIN base. This is why he does not go into an explanation. He says, one thing in absolute, another thing is not in an absolute limit. Okay. Now we're going to the next paragraph. Okay, on page 30. Hey, Ahu Inyan Hu. Okay, I'm just introducing a warning. It's not getting any easier, but it's getting much richer, and it is reaching in much deeper into our own neshama, our own seichel, our own life. But we have to allow this access. Lately, we were talking a lot about the principle of hidah. I remind myself of a word, as a saying that I heard coming from a REBBE. Someone also asked the REBBE, where is the Rebbe? Where is Hashem? So he said, "B'milustam arayin." B'milustam arayin means where you allow him in. He goes everywhere, but you have to allow him in. In other words, you don't find Hashem by digging in and by finding openings and reasonings how you can prove this. This is not what this is your own seichel. This is not Hashem. This is how you perceive it, how you convince yourself. But where do you find Hashem, the reality itself, the experience of Hashem, where we lost the Marayin? This is the principle of hidah, like we're saying lately. Recognition. Okay, let's go on. However, the inyan of this is, in other words, what is behind the principle that from chochmah can devolve in of binah, where it would appear that they're different categories completely, and how one and there's no relation, there's no way that you can explain one within the other. Hine yodua, for it is known the chochmah binah nikra ayin v'yesh. Chochmah and binah are called, are referred to as AYIN and yesh. Ayin means non-entity, and yesh means a presence. And we will discuss this hopefully today. Ha-chochmah nikra ayin. The chochmah is called ayin, non-entity. And as the posuk actually says, v'ha-chochmah mei ayin timotzei. The chochmah from ayin timotzei, it gets found. The word timotzei over here, I think I mentioned, timotzei over here implies two translations. Timotzei means it comes forth. Timotzei means it is found. The principle of finding is you find something unexpectedly. You happen to notice it. It does not expose itself earlier, so say there is something hidden therein. Ayin does not speak of anything, does not hint of any presence. And then when you give chochmah, it's timotzei. What?
Just turn the volume down.
What?
Just lower the volume.
Lower the volume? Okay. Who is there? Please mute your phone. All right. The binah nikra yesh, and then binah is called yesh. K'meisha kosuf, as the posuk says, v'hanchil oy havei yesh, to bequeath oy havei to my beloved yesh. Yesh, this is what comes down into the world, and becomes part of the life process of a yid. This is the yesh. Even though it's clearly he's exposed to chochmah, but what becomes part and parcel of his, that's the yesh part. A few more words and then we'll kind of interrupt on some discussion. V'im kain, and thus, since the chochmah is ayin and binah is yesh, our question is, how does binah come from chochmah? Therefore, from referring to chochmah and binah as ayin and yesh, it comes out that is havas ha-binah ha-chochmah, that the coming forth of binah from the chochmah, who bivchinas, is in the manner of yesh mei ayin. This also we need to discuss. Bivchinas means in the manner of the creation is a kind of a mode of creation. What's called yesh mei ayin, yesh from ayin. Let's understand again. I always point out the nuances in these words. Bivchinas. Bivchinas yesh mei ayin gives a description. What is the process of creation? Binah from chochmah. The process of creation binah from chochmah is in the manner of yesh from ayin. The V'hainu, which means to say, she'ha'ayin the chochmah, that the ayin of chochmah, who b'bchinas helem, is in a helem, in a concealed state, legabei hayesh binah, in relative and looking at and looking from the yesh of binah. The yesh of binah does not recognize the presence of this ayin of the helem. And yet it occurs. Because chochmah creates yesh miyai. First, we need to kind of refresh the concept. What is the significance of ayin?
Rabbi Paltiel?
Yes, sir.
Somebody's still not unmute. There's constant noise.
I'm sorry? Say again?
He's complaining that someone else is not muted.
Oh, yeah?
Right.
All right.
Can't hear. Can't hear. How's that?
Okay, please, everyone, please mute your phones because that interferes with the entire transmission. Thank you. First, we have to focus in and understand what is ayin. Ayin means nothing, non-existent. If non-existent, then what are you talking about? And how does ayin ultimately turn out to be a source of anything if there's nothing there? And this requires that's one kind of the first challenge to our intellect, to sense what is hidden in our own intellect. Just to give it a very, very simple expose. The Gemara says that a son who inherits property and he has the right to do with his property anything he wants, he buy and sell and so forth. When it comes to real estate, he has to be fully mature, which means before 20 he might not sell and buy in his father's property. Because what? Because lower than that age, he does not appreciate the value of real estate. We spoke about it many times. What is the difference between the value of real estate and any kind of tangible presence? Money and food and anything else. And the answer is quite clear. Money and food or anything else, you can measure it by your own experience. With money you can buy whatever you want to buy. A candy or a pair of shoes. Food you can enjoy the food and so forth. Real estate is a presence that exists wherever it exists. Regardless of how that it's yours, you cannot really take it and make it yours in a practical sense. You cannot experience the real estate directly. What then, in fact, is your relationship to the real estate? In a practical sense, this is called AYIN. There is not any kind of a interaction between the real estate and the person. And yet, the real estate, everyone who has reached 20 years, who reached maturity, knows that this is the most valuable presence in the world. What is so valuable about it? This is what's called real estate. It's part of the real world. It is not a temporary presence. it is rooted in the reality of the world itself. Even if you have a piece of real estate that's a desert, potentially a desert is a whole world. In Israel, when Eden took over the Negev, it was a desert. They made it fertile land. Because that's what real estate is. Fertile land does not only mean because it produces fruit, but because there's place to live, place to develop, build your homes or build factories, whatever it is. That's what real estate is about. In other words, real estate is a non-entity of a reality. It does not preclude anything, does not limit your usage of it. It's like AYIN. This AYIN is essentially everything. Chochmah and binah. Chochmah is like AYIN. Chochmah recognizes and relates to a truth that is a fundamental truth, indestructible truth, a truth that does not need to be created, a truth that's rooted in truth. It is true because it is true, like the Ocean from Rambam. Emes mipnei shehu emes. We human beings were blessed with intellect that has the capacity, the ability to relate to this type of talk, to this type of thought. It says, Umeida al ho'emes. You cannot understand emes, but moida al ho'emes. You take in emes because you're moida, because you recognize, hey, that is the real thing. This is the principle, the first principle of our life. Chochmah is a direct derivative of this emes. This is why Chochmah AYIN. In other words, it does not need to have a tangible presence in order to recognize that there is something there. The pure truth, the AYIN, is all that Chochmah needs. On the other hand, binah is in fact yesh. Binah is where, as we can see, from this chochmah is developed the yesh that we can draw from the AYIN. This is called yesh mei AYIN. Binah is a yesh, but it comes from chochmah. So binah cannot substantiate and say, here is the basis of this existence. There's an AYIN. So how is the AYIN an explanation for this yesh? The answer is, this AYIN is what we call a loaded AYIN. It's AYIN that represents a truth beyond description. This is the Yesh Me'ayin. Again, going back to our Mashal, we said before we spoke about the home, real estate. Odom shein lo bayis ein odom. Does not say a person does not have $1 million is not odom. Ein bayis. Bayis, this is the AYIN level of human presence in the world. The bayis stands in its place. And the person comes there occasionally. Most of the time it's outside of the home. But this makes him into Odom. This is the AYIN of the human presence in the world. Like we said many times, Howard Hughes was a billionaire. He had always a place where to sleep and where to eat. Always. In most luxurious circumstances. And yet, by our definition, we pointed out, he was not a full-fledged human being because he didn't have a home. He did not have a real presence in the world that this is where I belong. His presence in the world was defined by function. Where do I eat? Where do I sleep? Not where am I? Where am I was not a question. When you have a bias, that defines your presence in the world in the present that you are really a presence. It touches it to a connection to the reality of the world itself, the AYIN element. That's a real presence. If you are that without any definition, that's a real presence. If you are there only because of some kind of a benefit, that's not real presence. That's a limited presence. That's presence on binah level. The AYIN is a different kind of presence. One more nekuda that needs to be recognized, or at least pointed out, it's clearly recognized what we failed to recognize. The reason that there is that truth in the world is because the truth is a godly creation. Because the world is a godly creation. The world on itself does not provide for it. If we should look at the world the way the agency, the world developed itself, there would be no such AYIN. Everything in the world would be based on some kind of a definitive presence. The reason that there is the AYIN in the world is because the world is actually a godly creation. Yesh me'ayin. This is the amoshel of the egg, of the chicken egg. Chicken egg it hides completely its source. How did it get filled with all that thing? There's no way to explain it. The shell is a whole shell. So let me ask, are we together in this?
Yeah.
Oh, RASHAB. I hate when later on we say, oh no, he was completely out of whack. Okay, let me just finish this. So binah from chochmah, it's called, is bivchinas yesh me'ayin, is in a manner of yesh me'ayin, which means that even after the binah came to be from the chochmah remains in total concealment, helam. You cannot trace the binah back to the chochmah, because when you start looking at the chochmah, you see nothing. Okay, there's much to speak, but let's leave it at that. So chochmah is bivchinas helem u'gabe hayesh de binah. And this helem represents what's called the AYIN that contains everything. That has a godly truth, which is limitless. All right, I guess this is it for this morning. I know nobody is here yet, but I have to keep. Okay, call to him. Have a great day.